Good morning, everybody. This is Dr. Conrad Dela Cruz. Welcome CY631 to week 4. All right, this is your weekly micro lecture for the week. And before we begin, I'd like to um, make you aware that I have completed grading your previous week's assignments and discussions. Please have a look at your grade books to ensure you're showing grades for that area. Okay, for this week, we are establishing, or we're going to be talking about a baseline level of IT security within organizations. We're also talking about the second part or second half of domain 2 of CISM certification surrounding risk response, risk avoidance, risk transfer, and risk mitigations within the broader context of risk management. And with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. I will share my PowerPoint with you as soon as I find the share button on Zoom, and it looks like I have. And there is our PowerPoint. Okay, great. I am sharing. Let's go ahead and begin week 4's micro lecture for the CY631 Information Security Management course at Avila University. All right, establishing IT baselines. We're going to talk about risk response strategies. Security is not an add-on to our IT processes, standards, and procedures. It is, in fact, a foundation of all of IT. A security baseline makes sure that the minimum protections are in place across all systems, all data. Without baselines, risk will remain invisible to us and our controls inconsistent, no matter how good we are with implementing. If we do not have a baseline, if we've not measured that baseline, we will continue to have gaps. So establishing the baseline, how do we do it? So the key elements are access control, config hardening, config baselines. This includes patching, disabling unused services, uninstalling unused softwares, logging and monitoring. That's the use of SIEM as well as alerting. Data protection. This involves the use of encryption at rest and in transit. And then endpoint security, which includes antivirus, endpoint detection response, EDR, and device policies. Okay. I'm just going to go through this list one more time and give you examples for access controls. If you're a database administrator, all you should have access to is the database and the functions that you need. You should not have local administrative privileges on an entire server. It should just be restricted to the services you need. That's what access controls mean. Systems hardening. When we develop and deploy new systems, whether they are Windows-based, Linux-based, Macs, we have to apply the CIS hardening controls to them, level 1 and level 2. These basically ensures that the unused services are removed. And then we go through and uninstall softwares that are not needed for the enterprise. And then we make sure that these systems are added to policies for patching. Policies meaning like a deployment group. So when patches are released on Patch Tuesday, maybe on the second week of the month, a group of or a set of computers receive that update. Okay. So each system, once they're hardened, they have to be put in the patching cycles so that security patches, OS patches can be applied to them as they are released. Logging and monitoring is a very important aspect of information security. SIEM stands for Security Information Event Management. That is a solution called either QRadar or SolarWinds, right? These types of deal collect all kinds of logs from your different systems, different applications, databases, even in the cloud. And within this system, you can set up rules, alerts based on conditions. If this happens, send an email to the Security Operations Center, because that could be an indicator of attack, an indicator of compromise, or an indicator of someone trying to modify or steal your data. Let's talk about data protection. With regard to encryption at rest, we're talking about BitLocker on Windows. Anything native on the OS would be good, right? BitLocker is one of those. You might have something native within a hardware server or a hardware-based like a Dell laptop or a Dell desktop, right? These come with native encryption also. TPM might be one of those. And for in transit, we need to make sure valid SSL certificates are installed on your servers and applications so that when data is moving from one server to another or one endpoint to another, that is also encrypted. And then endpoint security, examples of this are CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Cisco, etc. Okay, next slide. Enterprise risk management in context. ARM, enterprise risk management, treats security risk as business risks. They're calculated as risks equals likelihood and impact, usually 5 times 5, within the range of 1 to 5 likelihood, 1 to 5 impact. And the goal here is to align risk responses with business appetite and objectives. For instance, if you have a risk that is rating at a likelihood of 5 and an impact of 5. 5 times 5 is 25. That's the highest, right? The business might want you to address that, right? Because that's a pretty high risk. However, the business appetite for accepting a risk might be a 10, right? So if you're looking at a risk that has a likelihood of 2 and an impact of 2, 2 times 2 equals 4, which is below the business appetite, they might tell you, hey, you know what, skip that one and go to the more riskier finding. Okay, next slide. Risk response strategies. You can either avoid a risk, right? You can either transfer a risk or mitigate a risk. Let's go opposite order. Mitigate. You're trying to reduce a risk, right? If there's a risk that there's no patch available for, maybe you start restricting access to that server or application. Maybe you apply more monitoring on that server or application, right? That's reducing your risk. When you're transferring a risk, right? When you're transferring a risk, that's basically getting an insurance, cybersecurity insurance. cybersecurity insurance is transferring a risk to an insurer that you're paying. However, that insurer will do an assessment on you to make sure that their risk is low, right? So they'll look at your cybersecurity program to see if it's mature. If it is, then they'll do business with you. If it's not mature, they're less likely to do business with you as far as insurance goes. If you have some gaps, right, they might raise the price on you. So it depends. And then risk avoidance, right? An example of this is, let's just say a software company is considering a new feature on their app. This would allow users to upload and store, I don't know, whatever file surrounding their identity, right, to the application. Obviously, that introduces a risk, right? Because that's the person's face, name, address, possibly some kind of ID, right? If it was a driver's license, it'll have your driver's license ID. It'll have your address, right? For risk avoidance, the company, you, might decide not to build this feature at all. Instead, it'll rely on an external service, right? So let me give you a more specific and very likely example. PCI, companies who sell stuff, right? T-shirts, mugs, games, what have you. They may not want to be PCI compliant. So when they process orders or process sales, they hire companies like Planet or some other payment processing service, right? In order to swipe your card, take your card, and get that payment from you for a nominal fee, of course, and that reduces your exposure to PCI. So rather than being compliant to all whatever 100 requirements that PCI has, you might only be required to follow 10. Okay. And each of these are applied differently in SDLC and operations, and we'll cover that at a later section. Okay, next slide. Risk avoidance. Again, this is eliminating the risk by not engaging in risky activity. I just gave you an example of PCI. Here's more examples. SDLC, avoid storing biometric data to reduce compliance risk, right? Another example is operations, drop support for insecure browsers and ciphers. Okay. Those are the examples of avoiding a risk. Not finding a risk and not addressing it, like ignoring it. That's not what avoidance means. It means if you have an application, let's just say you have remoting applications, remote desktop, VNC, VMware, right? All three of these you have to manage in order to avoid the overhead of potentially not patching any one of these, right? Maybe you just standardize to one RDP, right? It comes, it gets patched by Microsoft anyway, so you just maybe standardize to that, and you avoid the risk by having the other two by just standardizing to the one solution. All right, tolerance. Shifting responsibility to another party. In SDLC, we're using third party for payment processing. Okay, that's transferring. In operations, maybe this one was given earlier, you're purchasing insurance. And then mitigation, of course, reducing your likelihood or impact, secure code reviews for SDLC, in operations, IDS, IPS. And then applying risk strategies in SDLC. Requirements, avoid unnecessary data collection. Design, mitigate weak crypto with AES-256, right? Development, transfer liability via contracts. testing, mitigate with vulnerability fixes, deploy, mitigate insider misuse by implementing RBAC and multi-factor, and then maintenance, avoid legacy libraries. All right. Now let's talk about risk response in operational environments. For this one, avoidance means decommission of end-of-life systems, end-of-life third-party software, etc. Transferring is outsourcing distributed denial of service protection to maybe your ISP. Mitigation is zero trust segmentation and IDS. And I believe that is our 10th slide. So let's head to the summary. Again, for this week's micro lecture, we talked about baselines, security baseline, risk avoidance, risk transfer, risk mitigation. And then the final takeaway here is effective risk response equals balancing strategies within ERM. Okay, I think that's about all we have here. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. That completes our session for the week. Just a reminder, all your assignments and deliverables will be due this Sunday by 11:59 p.m. The due dates are in effect, so if you're turning in past Sunday at 11:59, you're probably going to incur points deduction, so look out for that. And if you have any questions, send me a note. Okay, bye guys.